Yesterday, Ted Cruz was pissed off, very angry. It appears he was the target of wiretapping attempts by the FBI under Joe Biden, that a certain Judge Boasberg, you might recognize his name, gave the green light for an extensive surveillance of members of the Senate, Republican members of the Senate, and it turns out a whole network of Republican think tanks, activist groups, and even media entities. This is Watergate, not on steroids, on freaking plutonium pills. And Ted Cruz had had enough. I'm going to show you what he had to say, and specifically calling for the impeachment of that federal judge. Yes, the same federal judge who has a single-handed jihad against Donald Trump on a daily basis. I want to show you that in a second. But first, let's get to the details of this story. You're not seeing it covered much in the corporate legacy media like the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN and everything. I'll explain why they're ignoring this story in a second. And it goes well beyond just their political bias and being in the tank for Democrats. No. It's actually much more deeper than that. Here's our friend Sean Davis, one of the publishers of The Federalist, breaking the latest news that was released by the Judiciary Committee about Operation Arctic Frost. We'll get into the name of this operation as well in a minute. There's a little bit of a clue there in the name of this investigation as to how it was specifically targeting Donald Trump and using the FBI and the Justice Department to get him personally. That's why they called it Arctic Frost. I'll explain in a sec. Arctic Frost whistleblower documents show that the corrupt Biden FBI subpoenaed the bank records, donor lists, and emails of nearly every major conservative organization and leader in the country, including Donald Trump's campaign, the RNC, Conservative Partnership Institute, Save America PAC, America First Policy Institute, even My Pillow. My Pillow! You take a look at the spreadsheet compiled by the Judiciary Committee, and before we even get too deep into this, because you're already going to hear Democrats and liberals and TDS never Trumpers screaming, well, of course they did. They were investigating a crime. There's nothing wrong with the FBI and the DOJ doing these kind of subpoenas over these organizations if these organizations committed a crime. That's not what this was. Okay? Don't fall for that. See, here in America, the FBI and the Justice Department or other law enforcement agencies, they investigate suspects who they believe committed a crime after they discover that a crime has been committed. That's how we do things here in America. Hey, there's a crime. What's the crime? Well, the crime is embezzlement, or the crime is, murder, or grand larceny, whatever. Tax fraud, you name it. You got to see that the crime has been committed. We have evidence that the crime has been committed. We have evidence that the law has been broken. Oh, okay. Who did it? Well, we got to find out who did it. We have some suspects. Okay, gather evidence. That's how it works. Here, what they did was, we think that someone may have committed a crime. Could be a whole lot of crimes. Could be insurrection. Could be election interference. We're not sure. We're not sure what crime was committed, but we think these people committed a crime of sorts. So now we're going to go investigate everybody and see if they committed a crime. Now, I understand that when the political left in America, led by Joe Biden and Merrick, Garland, and Christopher Wray, and these other fanatics, because they're on the political left, I understand why they are inspired and motivated by Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin, because that's where their heart and soul politically is. But they can't take it to such an extreme that they mimic their secret police tactics. And that's what happened here. This is the quintessential show me the man and I'll find you the crime scenario. This dragnet that they cast to investigate organizations, to put pressure on them, to make them feel heat, to find out who's donating to them, so then those people can be targeted. Well, wait a minute. What crime was committed? Oh, the insurrection or something. Really? Insurrection. Funny, because a lot of people got arrested after January 6th, and that one person was charged with insurrection. Oh, well, yeah, but they were going after Trump, see, and they had to go after him. Really? Because when Jack Smith, the special prosecutor investigating Donald Trump, who coordinated all of this outrageous, ridiculous garbage on behalf of you, the American taxpayer, when Jack Smith finally did charge Donald Trump with crimes, those charges, of course, thrown out by the Supreme Court, unconstitutional, but it doesn't matter. When he charged Donald Trump, he never charged him with insurrection. No, they said it was insurrection. They said that he was trying to subvert the Constitution and upend our government with a coup. And because they thought maybe that had happened, they went and started looking for a crime. That's what this story is. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Let's go to more of the details here. Catherine Herridge, independent journalist now. She was too good, so CBS had to let her go. I hope Barry Weiss hires her back. That would be sweet justice, and put her in charge of 60 Minutes. How delicious would that be? She's been all over the Arctic frost dragnet. Over 400 Republican organizations. Now, even if you buy into all of the TDS fever dream conspiracy theories about Trump, 2020 election, January 6th, coup attempt, insurrection, even if you buy into all that garbage, do you really believe that over 400 Republican individuals and organizations all coordinated to do that? Really? You think we're that good? Honestly, have you been paying attention to American politics for the last 5 decades? The joke used to be that I don't belong to an organized political party. I'm a Republican. We can't get anything straight. Seriously? You think we're that good? You think that we're coordinating? 400 Republican organizations are all holding hands and creating the... Trust me, if we were that good, y'all would never win an election, okay? And of course, nobody believes that. Even the people who were doing the investigating didn't believe that. They wanted access through court orders and subpoenas and wiretaps to look into us so that they could squeeze us, so they could stop us. This was the use of the federal government and the Justice Department to kill the conservative movement in America. And I can prove it to you. I will. First, though, you need to know the details of this. This is a list of the people who were caught up and subpoenaed by the FBI. And as Mike Benz points out, the dragnet included American media companies, Fox News, Fox Business, Newsmax, OANN, Sinclair. Did we end up on the list, by the way? I'm curious if we did. We may have, for that matter. It includes organizations like the Republican National Committee. The Republican National Committee. Nothing chilling about Joe Biden and a Democrat administration subpoenaing literally every single one of his political opponents and every single one of the organizations and think tanks that are politically aligned with Joe Biden's political opponents. Nixon had an enemies list, but he didn't hand it over to the FBI and the Justice Department and have them create a special prosecutor to go after the enemies list, subpoena the enemies list, wiretap the enemies list, and eventually prosecute the enemies list. He may have wanted to, but he was not as bold, apparently, as Joe Biden. Here's another example. This is from an FBI agent in Seattle, fingering a gentleman named Ed Corrigan. Now, Ed Corrigan is an old DC hand. He's the kind of guy who wears the gray chalk pinstripe suits from Brooks Brothers, okay? He goes back to being a staffer on Senator Jesse Helms' staff, okay, in the Reagan era. He worked at the Heritage Foundation. He now heads up an organization called the Conservative CPI. God, Kevin, help me out.
Partnership Institute.
Partnership Institute. Thank you. Conservative Partnership Institute. They do something really dastardly, CPI, the Conservative Partnership Institute. Oh, in a second, I'll tell you what they do, because it makes them public enemy number one, apparently, according to this FBI staffer. Ed Corrigan is pro-Putin, they claim, and anti-Biden. By the way, this is an FBI agent saying one of the reasons why they need to arrest or indict Ed Corrigan, one of the reasons, one of the pieces of evidence that shows that he's in some way an insurrectionist, is that he is anti-Biden. I could be wrong, but last I checked, it is still legal to oppose the president of the United States. You know how they call Trump an authoritarian and a dictator? I didn't see him do anything to stop the No Kings marches and rallies. But here is an FBI agent in a partially redacted memo fingering Ed Corrigan as a suspect and a target for investigation for criminal activity. And one of the reasons, one of the descriptors to rationalize why Ed Corrigan needs to be targeted is he's anti-Biden. Dude, I know I'm on someone's list at the FBI if that's all it takes. They consider what Corrigan is doing is treason. Being anti-Biden is treason. Blank believes that, by the way, part of my problem with this from the FBI and Kash Patel, I know that you got a lot going on, but these redactions here, you're redacting the names of the guilty, not the innocent. You're redacting names of people who identified Ed Corrigan as a treasonous traitor to the United States of America because he was anti-Biden. Take those redactions off. Don't protect the guilty, okay? Believes that Corrigan and his boss, Mark Meadows, former chief of staff of President Trump, former congressman from North Carolina, are engaging in willful criminal activity. According to Blank, Corrigan has blank properties at which he wants to build up infrastructure to train people for civil war. Ed Corrigan? Corrigan secretly controls the Freedom Caucus and has plans that are not good for the FBI. Well, there's a crime if you have plans that are not good for the FBI. Corrigan hates the FBI. Also, last I checked, legal. Who he refers to as spooks. By the way, he refers to FBI as spooks. People in the FBI refer to themselves as spooks. People who work at the CIA, people who are in the intelligence community and work in intelligence refer to themselves on a regular basis as spooks. I know people who work in these businesses, these industries, these organizations who call themselves spooks. This is absolutely Maoist what they're doing here. Corrigan claims to have identified in blank as a spook in the blank, on and on and on. All right, I told you that I would reveal what Ed Corrigan and the conservative
partnership.
Thank you. God, I don't know why my brain is stalled on that word. What the Conservative Partnership Institute does that makes them so dangerous and so treasonous. Here's what they do. They conduct training sessions for staffers on Capitol Hill, because it's the Conservative Partnership Institute. It's staffers who work for Republicans. They have training sessions. So these people who work in congressional staffs for Republicans in Congress can learn how to effectively conduct oversight over the executive branch. I don't know if you knew this or not, but the legislative branch, one of their constitutional roles is to conduct oversight over the executive branch. They even have a whole committee called the Oversight Committee. One of those departments of the executive branch that is subject to congressional oversight is the FBI. What did they say about Ed Corrigan? He has plans that are not good for the FBI. Yeah, that's true. If you want to be able to run independent from the Constitution and the legislative branch, and you don't want to be subject to any oversight, then yeah, I guess those would be plans that are not good for the FBI. That's kind of a tell, isn't it? Yeah, Ed Corrigan and the Conservative Partnership Institute conduct regular, thorough seminars to train up congressional staffers to effectively conduct oversight over the executive branch of government, and that makes him treasonous. Plus, being anti-Biden, of course. Yesterday, the Senate Judiciary Committee had a press conference about all of this stuff, and they put out this very informative graphic to show you exactly what Arctic frost is. It was the brainchild of 4 individuals, all appointed by and working for Joe Biden, the most corrupt president we have ever had in our nation's history. Merrick, Garland, Lisa Monaco, Jack Smith, and Christopher Wray. It was meant to target President Trump, but to get to President Trump, and as a rationale to get President Trump, they subpoenaed and investigated or wiretapped multiple members of Congress, including 9 members of the Senate, 92 Republican organizations and individuals, 197 subpoenas for over 430 Republican entities and individuals. Nixon can only dream of such a thing. J. Edgar Hoover can only dream of such a thing. Christopher Wray is making J. Edgar Hoover look like Mr. Rogers. This is disgusting. And no, you're not hearing about it in the corporate legacy media. I'll tell you why. Here's the headlines at the New York Times front page. Where have you got it? Anything? Anything? Nothing. Oh, we do have an important article about a college selling Black history murals to avert a financial crisis. That made it to the front page of the New York Times, but nothing about Arctic frost. Okay, what about the Washington Post? I mean, after all, they made their name on the Watergate investigation. Woodward and Bernstein, baby, all the president's men, they're all over it, right? It's happening in their backyard after all. Nope. No, they do have an article about how frustrating it is for people to call the Social Security offices right now. Wait times and trouble you're getting answers. They got that. They got nothing on this. And now people will easily slip into a pattern of saying, oh, it's because of liberal bias. It's because they're in the tank for Democrats, right? That's why they're not covering it. Because now that's part of it, sure. But it goes deeper than that. See, the problem is, if the Washington Post and the New York Times were to cover this story, they'd have to admit their own guilt. You see, they're part of this story. A big part of it. And the reason why they are not informing their readers now about it is because their readers would have to say, well, wait a second. I read all of the articles in this exact same newspaper telling me that Trump was a criminal and that all these entities and organizations that was valid and that they should be criminally investigated. And the fact of the matter is, by not covering this story, they're admitting their guilt. You see, if you're the New York Times and you're the Washington Post and you agree that this was a vast network of 400 Republicans and conservative entities that were involved in a coup of the United States government, and now it's been revealed by the Judiciary Committee that Jack Smith had all these subpoenas and this network of investigations, well, you would put that story out there saying, hey, looks like Jack Smith was doing the right thing. Looks like Jack Smith did a great job. Chuck Grassley's trying to claim that this is bad, but we've already reported to our readers. We already know that this was a righteous, constitutional, and appropriate investigation, but they're not writing that story, are they? No, they're not. They're ignoring it completely. And that tells you they know this thing stinks like rotten fish. They know. And so does Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz was specifically targeted by Jack Smith and Merrick Garland and Joe Biden. And Ted Cruz was pissed off.
The Biden Justice Department signed off on issuing subpoenas for the phone records of at least 9 U.S. senators. 20% of the Republicans in the United States Senate were the target of this fishing expedition. They did so in complete contravention of the Constitution, of separation of powers, of the speech and debate clause, of free speech, of basic rights of privacy. This is an executive who believes it is justified spying on their opponents in the legislature because they convince themselves the ends justify the means.
That's right. I told you that this all comes from Biden, and that they thought they were righteous, that they were on the side of the angels to go after. They truly believed that all of these Republicans and all of these senators and all these organizations, and ultimately you, were the enemy of the American people. How do I know that? Because I saw Joe Biden's speech that he gave before Independence Hall when it was bathed in blood red. And he was screaming that MAGA Republicans, you'll remember, MAGA Republicans are an existential threat to the future of our country. That MAGA Republicans are an existential threat to our Constitution and free and fair elections. You remember it? I remember it. We all saw it. It was a talking point of Democrats. So if you really believe that, then you can convince yourself that it is righteous and noble and beautiful to use the levers of power that you have to exploit the Constitution and to investigate not just your political enemies, but the enemies of the Republic itself. And that's exactly what they did. Ted Cruz had more to say.
Arctic frost is Joe Biden's Watergate. Merrick Garland was a fundamentally corrupt attorney general. Jack Smith was a fundamentally corrupt prosecutor. This was a political enemies list from the beginning. 197 subpoenas for 430 Republican entities and individuals. That is an absolute and egregious abuse of power.
Now, we already knew from a press release a couple of weeks ago from Chuck Grassley's office that the FBI had subpoenaed metadata from the cell phone carriers to track these senators' cell phone and mobile phone activities in the months after the January 6th events. That was from AT&T. What we learned yesterday, that the surveillance of call data did not end there. It got quite extensive and even reached to the office phones of these senators. You hear about constitutional crisis a lot. This is the FBI, and by the way, this is a special prosecutor who was never confirmed by the Senate. Every other U.S. attorney who works for the Justice Department has to go through Senate confirmation. Jack Smith never did. This is a rogue, powerful, unconstitutional prosecutor attempting to use surveillance tactics on the legislative branch of government. Specifically, the Judiciary Committee, these guys who were charged with oversight of the Justice Department. The Justice Department answers to these senators. These senators answer to us, the American people. That's how the Constitution was set up. Jack Smith answers to no one. And he tried to use this power to go after the one entity that has oversight over the Justice Department. There should be nightly primetime specials about this right now if cable news actually cared about the truth.
I've recently been informed by Verizon that at least 11 members with Verizon accounts were affected. That includes a hard line for Senator Cruz's office and a staffer's cell phone for former Senator Loeffler. AT&T informed me they challenged the legal basis for Jack Smith's efforts, and Smith backed down.
Did you hear that? AT&T challenged the constitutionality of Jack Smith's subpoena for these phone records. AT&T challenged it. You realize, of course, that to have the subpoena to demand these phone records from AT&T, a federal judge had to approve it. So AT&T actually had more understanding of our Constitution and the Bill of Rights than a federal judge. Oh, and who was the federal judge? You might recognize his name, Boasberg. Yes. Boasberg, the guy who told Trump to turn a plane around in mid-flight outside the boundaries of the United States of America when he was constitutionally and appropriately sending terrorists from Venezuela to a prison in El Salvador. That Judge Boasberg, who at every step of the way has tried to block everything that Donald Trump has done since he's been inaugurated, because Judge Boasberg believes that he's more powerful than the executive branch of government. He's Judge Boasberg, after all. Yeah, he signed off on a whole lot of this. Cruz named him specifically yesterday.
I am right now calling on the House of Representatives to impeach Judge Boasberg. Judge Boasberg put his robe down, stood up, and said, "Sign me up to be part of the partisan vendetta against 20% of the Republicans in the Senate." That is a dereliction of duty and a violation of the judicial oath. And I want to thank Chairman Grassley and Chairman Johnson for pursuing this tenaciously like a dog on a bone. We are going to get the answers of every person who signed off on this abuse of power, and mark my words, there will be accountability for these zealots who wanted to corrupt the Department of Justice and corrupt the judiciary in order to try to attack their enemies list.
All right. And that's good stuff. And we love Cruz, and he's right. And it would be great if the House did that with Judge Boasberg. And I love that they're going after all of these zealots, as Cruz put it. It's going to get interesting, though, because I believe, and I think I'm right, that a lot of those zealots who participated in this, supported this, enabled this, encouraged this, cheered this on, some of those zealots are sitting in desks right alongside Senator Cruz in the Senate chamber. Let's go back for a moment when Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared before the Judiciary Committee. Here's Adam Schiff. Oh, yes, Adam Schiff. He's got fingerprints all over this garbage, right? Well, do you remember how Adam Schiff reacted when the discussion in this hearing turned to whether Jack Smith, this rogue, unconstitutional, Inspector Javert type special prosecutor who's all over this, who spearheaded all of this, when the subject of Jack Smith came up in this hearing, and whether Pam Bondi and the Trump administration would be looking into any of the activities of Mr. Smith. Remember this?
The president has said Jack Smith should go to jail. Will you investigate Jack Smith?
Senator, I haven't seen the file. I haven't seen the investigation. I haven't looked at anything. It would be irresponsible of me to make a commitment regarding anything without, you're a long practicing attorney, without looking at a file.
So you would need a factual predicate to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
Not a summary by you sitting here. Yes, sir.
And not a summary by the president either, right?
Absolutely.
So a summary by the president or his desire to investigate Jack Smith would not be enough for you to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
I will look at the facts and evidence in any case. And sitting here, 72%,
sitting here today.
Senator, 72% of Americans
please, I only have
have
7
lost
minutes.
faith in the Department of Justice.
Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Sitting here today, yes or no?
Senator, I will look at the facts and the circumstances.
You can't answer that question?
Brought to me.
You're not a part of the department yet. There's no worry about divulging
I'm sitting
law
here as a
enforcement
nominee.
sensitive information. So just tell us,
I'm
are you
sitting here as a
aware,
nominee.
just tell us, are you aware of a factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Yes or no?
Senator, what I'm hearing on the news is
Are you aware of
horrible.
a?
Do I know if he committed a crime?
reluctant.
I have not
You
looked
seem
at it.
reluctant to answer a simple question. Let me ask you a different simple question.
Wow, he seems really, really concerned about whether Jack Smith will get investigated or not, right? Weird. He seems nervous about the idea that Jack Smith might be investigated. I would love for someone to ask Jack Smith or Christopher Wray or Merrick Garland a similar question. Are you aware of a factual predicate that would support the 450 plus subpoenas that you have pulled on Republicans, senators, congressmen, and media entities, as well as think tanks. Is there a factual predicate to suggest that they're guilty of a crime? Because they didn't seem too bothered about investigating them. But now we need a factual predicate. Why is Adam Schiff so worried about an investigation into Jack Smith? This was 9 months ago, 10 months ago during the confirmation hearing. It's a funny thing. Jack Smith is pure as the pristine snow. He is one of the greatest, most dedicated lawyers and law enforcement investigators and prosecutors that the United States Justice Department has ever encountered. He's blameless. He's clean as a whistle. He's spotless. I know this because the media told me. Remember how excited they were when he got a Subway sandwich after bringing down indictments against Trump? Jack Smith is the finest man ever to walk the halls of the U.S. Justice Department. So why would they be so worried about an investigation into his perfect, pristine investigation of Donald Trump and all of these other people? You see, sitting there at that moment, Ted Cruz and Chuck Grassley and all the other Republicans you saw at the press conference yesterday, they didn't know that Jack Smith had tapped their phones, had subpoenaed the phone companies for their records. They didn't know any of that. Do you think Adam Schiff might have known? Do you? Maybe. Meanwhile, last night, J.D. Vance was confronted at the Turning Point USA event that he did. He stood in for Charlie Kirk. Great event. You should watch as much of it as you can. During the question and answer session, somebody challenged him with a question that I hear a lot in town here in D.C., and that is, you Republicans, you should be careful. Be real careful with all the things you're doing here, because the second Democrats are in power, they're going to do it to you. You hear that a lot, don't you? Which, by the way, I think is hilarious on multiple levels, which I can get to in a minute. But let's hear J.D. Vance's response to that first.
But there is something you guys are doing that is kind of disturbing me a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. You guys have sent the military into Washington, D.C. and a few other cities that I can't think of off the top of my head, which, first off, they've had wonderful results. Like, no one can deny the results of that. It's wonderful. Some might even say the greatest. I'm a comedian.
I like this guy. Who is this guy?
Thank you, JD. I like you too.
Now he's gonna ask the question about all the shit that we did wrong, but that's okay. Go ahead and ask your question.
But yeah, I'm just wondering, well, it's not necessarily something you did wrong, but it's what could someone else do wrong? Let's say we get a complete tyrant in office, and let's say Turning Point USA is having a huge protest against something really bad that we don't like, and let's say he's a president is saying that it's getting violent. How can we? I'm trying to think. My mind's kind of blank. What is the difference between what you're doing and how could we prevent someone from abusing that power?
Yeah. So look, I understand where the question is coming from, and I think it's a fair question. And it's going to sound like I'm being sarcastic, and it really is not meant in any offense. But when you talk about what could another administration do, to take a wild hypothetical example totally off the top of my head, what if Joe Biden sent the Federal Bureau of Investigation to start arresting his political opponents? Okay? So here's something that I want every conservative to remember. It's an important part of my entire political philosophy is we cannot be afraid to do something because the left might do it in the future. The left is already going to do it regardless of whether we do it. That is the takeaway of the last 40 years.
Yeah, the left is already going to do it. In fact, the left has probably already done it. In fact, the stuff that they've done that we haven't uncovered, or at least hasn't been revealed, is probably mind-blowing. And it's one of the reasons why it hasn't been revealed, because we can't handle the truth. That's the only appropriate response. Oh, no, what if the left gets into power and they do these things? Have you not been paying attention? Have you not seen what they've done? And they never pay a price at all. The only response to that has been, yeah, you're right. It was wrong for them to go after Trump, but they paid for it in the election. I'm sorry. Losing an election after the constitutional abuse of power that these people, losing an election is the least of the pain that they should feel for what they did. How about jail? How about jail? And one other response that I would throw out there is, well, we shouldn't do these things because then when Democrats go into power, they might do it. Here's the thing. You may be right. The question is not whether Republicans shouldn't do it because Democrats might do it, and on and on and on. The question is it the right thing to do? You shouldn't call in the National Guard to cut down on crime in these cities because then Democrats might do it for nefarious reasons. Okay, well, are we doing it for nefarious reasons? Because that matters. This isn't a new constitutional power that's being exercised. The power is there, young man. Okay? And this power has been utilized and wielded for good and righteous and appropriate constitutional things in the past, and that's what's happening right now with regard to crime in these cities and cooperation with local law enforcement to fix the problem, or at the very least, if you're not getting cooperation from local law enforcement, to go in and protect federal interests in these cities. It's been done before for very good reasons, and it's being done now for very good reasons. Your argument is not whether Democrats will do it or the left will do it in the future. I'm sure they will. The question is, will they do it for unconstitutional reasons and for nefarious reasons? And let's just cross that bridge when we know we get to it, because we know that we will. President Trump, by the way, was flying back on Air Force One while all of this was going down last night. President Trump finished his meetings with Xi Jinping. He finished the summit with Japan. He finished the peace deal with Cambodia and Thailand. He finished working on the summit in South Korea. He finished doing the business of the head of state overseas, got on Air Force One, opened up his phone, and saw all this stuff about Jack Smith. And I have a feeling he looked and said, what the is going on here? Are you kidding me? Subpoenas of the phone records of senators, a dragnet of 450 different Republican people and entities caught up in it, 20% of the U.S. Senate under surveillance by this rogue prosecutor who wasn't even confirmed by the U.S. Senate. What? So he did what Donald Trump does. He posted on Truth Social. He started with this one. These thugs should all be investigated and put in prison. A disgrace to humanity. Deranged Jack Smith is a criminal. And then he is a criminal and should be in jail, a major lowlife and failure, an ugly person, both inside and out. Beat him badly. I'm sorry. I beat him badly and love watching him squirm now. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, on Air Force One, middle of this morning, en route back to Washington, D.C., as he's now gotten wind of what's been going on here this last week. He had bigger fish to fry. That's just scratching the surface on this story. Oh, one other thing I promised to tell you. I want to deliver. Arctic Frost, right? That's the name of the investigation. Is it Arctic Frost?
Yep.
Thank you. Why did they name it Arctic Frost? Usually the FBI, they have a computer that uses like a randomizer to come up with names for investigations. Sometimes, though, prosecutors want to go in and they want to assign a name that's specifically, connected to the investigation. Like Crossfire Hurricane, by the way. Crossfire Hurricane was a lyric out of a Rolling Stones song. Rolling Stones is one of the songs that Trump used in all of his rallies in 2016. You don't always get what you want. They did Crossfire Hurricane as the name of the investigation into Donald Trump as a bit of a hat tip there. This time around, Arctic Frost. Why Arctic Frost? Well, Arctic Frost is an orange that survives the frost in Florida and is utilized in the orange industry. Yeah, orange. Because Trump is orange. And oh, by the way, this investigation encompassed down to the Florida files investigation when the FBI went into Mar-a-Lago to get files because they thought that it was all part of this big anti-constitutional coup attempt led by the orange man, Donald Trump. They're cute and they're clever, aren't they? Except they made one mistake. Okay, two mistakes. they thought that they would damage Donald Trump so much with these investigations and the innuendos and the prosecutions that came out of New York that he wouldn't win the election, and he did. That was a big mistake, because now he controls the Justice Department and the FBI, and they're discovering all of the garbage that went on during the Biden administration. The second mistake, with their Arctic frost and their orange and their Florida thing, is that they raided Mar-a-Lago. That was a big mistake, because now, when the Trump Justice Department under Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, when they initiate their indictments over the abuse of power and the violations of the Constitution and the grand conspiracy against Trump and his campaign and his administration and all these other people who got caught up in this, well, when they initiate that grand jury, it's not going to be here in D.C. No. Because of that FBI raid down in Mar-a-Lago, they have every right to pull that grand jury down in Florida, South Florida. Trump country. That grand jury and the indictments, should they come, will be handed down in Florida. The court that will hear the prosecutions will be in Florida. The 12 members of the jury to determine whether these people violated federal law will be from Florida. That's a nice tall glass of orange juice, isn't it?